Emma didn't move. Her breath hitched as she heard twigs snapping. Whatever was approaching was larger than the python, larger than anything she had dealt with in the wild before. Still lying on the ground, one leg wrapped by the snake, she twisted her head toward the sound, her heartbeat now hammering in her chest. Through the tall grass, golden shapes began to appear. 1, 2, then more. Lions. A whole pride of them. Emma froze, barely daring to breathe. There were 6 of them, 3 females, 2 younger lions, and 1 massive male with a dark mane that shimmered in the light. They moved like ghosts, smooth and silent, their yellow eyes fixed on the strange scene before them. A human entangled with a python, clutching a small dog against her chest. She expected them to pounce either on her, the dog, or the snake. She didn't know which would come first, only that this was how it was going to end. But the lions did something unexpected. Stopped. The lead lioness, broad-shouldered and scarred from many hunts, stepped forward. Her nose twitched as she studied Emma. Then she let out a low growl. The sound rolled through the clearing like thunder. The python turned its head toward the noise. And that's when everything shifted. The lioness pounced, not at Emma, not at Jasper, but directly at the python. Her massive paw slammed down on the snake's middle, and a sickening thump echoed through the trees. The python thrashed, hissing furiously, loosening its grip around Emma's leg as it turned to defend itself. Before it could strike, another lion joined in, biting into the snake's tail and shaking it like a rope. The entire pride exploded into motion, roaring and growling as they tore into the snake. Emma watched in disbelief. She used the moment to crawl backward, dragging Jasper with her, her leg throbbing but free. She didn't stop until she was behind a bush, out of the lion's direct view. She didn't know what stunned her more, that she had just been attacked by a python, or that a pride of lions had just saved her life. She held Jasper tight against her chest. His breathing was shallow but steady. She could feel his tiny heart beating against her arm. He was alive, bruised, shaken, but alive. And so was she. The chaos in the clearing began to die down. The python, battered and bloodied, slithered away. The lions stood tall, breathing heavily, their manes ruffled in the wind. One of them, the same lioness who had first stepped forward, turned her eyes toward Emma again. They stared at each other for a moment, 2 living beings on opposite ends of the wild. Then the lioness huffed, turned, and disappeared into the grass, followed by the rest of the pride. Within seconds, the clearing was silent again, as if nothing had happened. Emma remained crouched behind the bush, her body trembling. She could barely wrap her mind around what she had just experienced. She had come to Africa for peace, for the untouched beauty of the wild. Instead, she had come face to face with death and witnessed an act of nature that no one would believe. She looked down at Jasper, whose eyes fluttered open. He gave a faint wag of his tail. She laughed, softly. "You owe them your life, buddy," she whispered. And perhaps, she thought, she did to. Emma could still feel the grass trembling under her as she slowly stood up, cradling Jasper in her arms. Her body ached, especially her leg, where the python had wrapped its crushing coils. Blood trickled down a shallow cut on her shin, and her shirt was torn from the scuffle. But all that mattered was that they had survived. Barely. She took one last look at the clearing. There was no sign of the lions now, not even a whisper, just the flattened grass where the chaos had unfolded, and the faint trail where the python had slithered off in retreat. It was as if nature itself had erased the scene. Her hands trembled as she took her first step back toward the lodge. Jasper whimpered softly but nuzzled closer to her chest. He was sore and frightened, but he would recover. Emma wasn't so sure about herself. The emotional toll of what had just happened was still sinking in. She had nearly lost him, and had the lions not appeared when they did, she might not have made it out either. The walk back felt longer than it had that morning. Every rustle in the grass, every snap of a twig sent a shiver through her spine. She turned often, half expecting the python or worse to return. Her senses were on full alert. The bush, which had seemed peaceful just hours earlier, now felt unpredictable and alive in a different, darker way. At the edge of the trail, a lodge ranger named Duma spotted her and rushed forward. His eyes widened the moment he saw her injuries, and Jasper clutched in her arms. "What happened?" he asked, voice sharp with concern. Emma tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She handed Jasper over gently, then leaned against a tree, breathing heavily. Duma examined the dog, then looked at her leg. "You've been bitten." "No," Emma managed. "Wrapped by a python." Duma's expression changed instantly. He nodded slowly, realizing how close they must have come to tragedy. "We need to get you to the medic," he said. "Can you walk?" She nodded, pushing herself upright. The pain was manageable compared to the shock she still carried. As they walked, she told him everything: how Jasper had run into the grass, how she found him being crushed, and how she fought the snake with her bare hands. Duma listened quietly, his face unreadable, but when she mentioned the lions, he stopped walking. "A pride of lions," he repeated. Emma nodded. "They didn't attack me, they attacked the python. They saved us." Duma looked down at the dirt, then out toward the tree line. "That's not something I've ever seen," he said carefully. "Not with wild lions. They don't usually intervene like that. Not for humans." "Do you think it was a coincidence?" she asked. Duma didn't answer right away. Maybe, or maybe they sensed something else. Back at the lodge, Emma was taken to a small treatment room where the medic cleaned her wounds. Jasper was given a warm bath and wrapped in a soft towel. The staff brought her tea, and a few guests gathered nearby, curious but respectful. Word spread quickly. Emma's story was like something out of a movie, and no one could believe it had really happened. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the acacia trees, Emma sat on the porch outside her cabin with Jasper curled up beside her. She replayed the moment the lioness had stared at her. There had been no fear in those golden eyes, just something else, something she couldn't explain. Why hadn't they attacked her? She thought of the legends she'd heard from the locals, tales about animals sensing danger, about spirits in the wild watching over those who respected nature. She'd always dismissed them as stories, but after today, she wasn't so sure. She looked down at Jasper, sleeping peacefully for the first time in hours. She had saved his life, and in return, life had given them both another chance, delivered by the most unlikely of rescuers. But this was far from over. Emma had questions, and the next morning she intended to get answers from someone who knew the wild better than anyone else. The next morning, the air over the delta was still and heavy. A thin mist clung to the ground, swirling around the base of the trees like silent smoke. Emma awoke before dawn, her body sore but determined. Jasper was curled at her feet, stirring slightly as she moved. He seemed better, eating, alert, tail twitching, but the memory of the python's grip still haunted both of them. She needed answers. After a quick breakfast, Emma approached Duma again. He had been a ranger in the area for over 2 decades, and knew more about the delta's animals than anyone else she had met. He was standing near the jeep, preparing for the morning patrol. "I need to see where it happened again," Emma said firmly. Duma studied her face. "You sure that's a good idea? You're still recovering." "I have to," she replied. "I need to understand what really happened." With a slow nod, Duma agreed. They loaded up into the open jeep, and Jasper, though, headed in after her, sticking close. As the vehicle rolled through the brush, Emma scanned every shadow, every movement of the leaves. Her eyes were sharper now, alert in a way they hadn't been before. She was no longer just a visitor. She'd become a part of the bush's story. They reached the clearing just as the morning sun broke through the mist. The grass where the battle had taken place was still flattened. A few broken branches lay nearby, and faint grooves from the python's tail marked the soil. But there were no animals in sight. It was eerily quiet. Emma stepped out of the jeep slowly, Jasper following close. Behind, she crouched at the center of the clearing and touched the ground where the snake had first wrapped around him. Her hand brushed the dirt softly. "It was here," she whispered. Duma joined her. "This place, it's known to some of the older guides. They say the lions hunt here often, but they also say strange things happen here sometimes. Things that don't follow normal patterns." Emma looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "Lions don't usually come to help people," he said. "But the pride you saw, they'd been seen before. The locals call them the Watchers. They're not like the others. They move differently. They don't fear people, but they don't attack either. They observe." Emma stood slowly. "You're telling me they've done something like this before?" "Not quite like this," Duma admitted, "but there have been stories. A poacher chased off by roars in the night, a lost child found unharmed, with lion prints around her in the mud." She blinked. "You believe that?" "I believe the bush is bigger than we understand." They stayed silent for a moment, just listening to the sounds of insects and distant birds. Emma's mind raced back to the look in the lioness's eyes, how calm she had been, how purposeful. It hadn't been instinct, it had felt like a decision. She looked around. Do you think they'll come back? If they do, Duma said, they'll come when they choose, not because we want them to. On the way back to the lodge, they passed a group of elephants crossing a shallow stream. The air felt warmer now, lighter. Emma leaned back in her seat. Jasper nestled beside her, his head resting on her lap. Her leg ached with each bump, but she ignored it. She didn't come to Africa looking for this. But now that it had happened, she felt changed. The fear had left something behind, an urge to understand, to connect more deeply with the world around her. Not just as a photographer, but as someone who had been touched by the wilderness in a way few people ever had. That night, she sat on the porch again with Jasper, watching the stars begin to shimmer in the sky. Somewhere out there, the lions were watching. And for the first time in her life, she felt safer knowing that. She didn't know it yet, but the lions weren't finished with her story. Not by a long shot. 2 days passed without incident. The lodge returned to its usual quiet rhythm, tourists coming and going, birds singing through the mornings, and the bush hiding its mysteries behind rustling leaves and long golden grass. But for Emma, things had shifted permanently. She hadn't gone on any long walk since the python attack. Jasper was still recovering, though he insisted on following her everywhere. His bruises were healing, but he would often freeze at the sound of rustling leaves, staring at the grass as if expecting another snake to appear. Emma understood the feeling. Even though the clearing was far from the lodge, she found herself glancing over her shoulder constantly, scanning the tree lines. But beneath the fear, something else stirred, a strange anticipation. The lions hadn't returned. No roars at night, no fresh prints near the lodge. But Emma could feel something in her chest, a pull that grew stronger with each passing sunset. It wasn't fear, it was curiosity, and something more, a sense that her path with those lions wasn't finished. She spent her nights sitting outside her cabin, staring out toward the vast openness of the delta, Jasper lying at her feet. On the third evening, just after dinner, something changed. It started with the birds. Their usual chorus fell silent all at once. Then the wind shifted, and in the distance, just beyond the outer ring of firelight, something moved. Emma sat up straight. Jasper lifted his head, ears sharp. A figure stepped into view. Not a person, not a shadow, a lioness. She was alone, her golden body glowing faintly in the moonlight. She walked slowly, gracefully, eyes fixed on Emma, not with aggression, not with fear, but with something strikingly familiar. Recognition. Emma stood. Her heart pounded, but she didn't move away. She and Jasper remained at the edge of the cabin porch, completely still. The lioness stopped several feet from the fire's edge, watching them. Her face was calm, her posture relaxed. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, just as silently as she had come, the lioness turned and disappeared back into the grass. Emma stood frozen, heart thudding, eyes fixed on the place where the lioness had stood. She wasn't imagining it. Jasper had seen her too. He was now standing at her side, tail low but wagging ever so slightly. The next morning, Emma found fresh tracks near her porch, large, unmistakable paw prints in the soft dirt. She called for Duma and showed him. He crouched beside the prints, nodding slowly. "She came to see you," he said simply. Emma exhaled. "Why?" "Just to watch. Maybe she remembers," he said. "Lions are smarter than we give them credit for. They remember who hurt them and who didn't." Emma stared at the prints. "She didn't look at me like I was a threat." "That's because you're not," Duma said. "You were just another animal fighting to protect your own." That evening, Emma sat outside again, waiting. She didn't expect to see the lioness, not 2 nights in a row, but deep down she hoped. As the stars came out, she heard Jasper shift beside her, alert once more. Emma looked out into the darkness. And once again, there she was, the same lioness, emerging from the grass. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, 2 young cubs stepped forward, wide-eyed and cautious, trailing behind their mother. The lioness didn't look at Emma right away. She looked at her cubs, then turned her head, meeting Emma's gaze across the firelight. Emma didn't understand it, not completely, but something unspoken passed between them in that moment, a connection not made of words or logic, but of survival, of trust. The lioness gave a short, low grunt, barely a sound at all, then turned and disappeared into the dark, her cubs following behind her. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The wild, it seemed, hadn't just spared her life, it had accepted her into its silence. The morning after the lioness returned with her cubs, Emma felt different. Something deep inside her had shifted again, not out of fear, but a strange kind of peace. She had spent years chasing wild moments through a camera lens, but now she was living one that no lens could ever capture properly. Over breakfast, word had spread around the lodge about the lioness visiting Emma's cabin. A few guests were curious, asking cautious questions. One tourist asked if she was afraid. Emma smiled gently and said, "Not anymore." Duma pulled her aside later that day. "I've spoken with one of the trackers," he said. "He's followed that pride before. He says they've never approached the lodge before. They stay deep inside the northern brush." "So why now?" Emma asked. "That's the question, isn't it?" he replied. Later that afternoon, Duma took her and Jasper on a special patrol, a quiet ride out into the northern brushlands where the lions were known to roam. Jasper sat beside Emma, his small head poking out from the side of the open vehicle. He was still cautious, but far more curious now. The python encounter had left its mark, but the visits from the lioness seemed to have changed something in him, too. He no longer whimpered at every rustle. The jeep moved slowly through the tall yellow grass, tires crunching gently against dry earth. After an hour of winding through narrow game paths, Duma slowed the vehicle and pointed toward a small rise there, he said. Emma followed his finger. At the top of the slope, the lioness stood again, alone this time, her head high and eyes locked onto them from afar. She didn't move. Emma and the lioness stared at one another across the golden field. Emma didn't raise her camera. For once, she didn't need to document the moment. Living it was enough. Duma spoke quietly. "She's watching Jasper." Emma looked down at her dog. Jasper was standing on all fours now, tail raised, eyes fixed forward. He wasn't barking. He wasn't even trembling. He was alert, but calm. "She remembers," Duma added. "That day with the python. She saw you fight for him. Animals notice courage." Emma said nothing, her throat tight with emotion. In a world where people often underestimated the depth of animals, she had just found herself in the center of something no science journal could explain. It wasn't just wild instinct. It was recognition, respect, maybe even gratitude. Suddenly, from behind the rise, movement stirred. The lioness turned slightly, and from the grass the rest of her pride appeared. The male lion, massive and imposing, strode out first, followed by the other lionesses and two cubs. They flanked her silently, forming a calm and watchful wall. No growls, no aggression, just presence. Then something happened that Emma would never forget. The lioness took a few steps forward, slowly, deliberately. She walked to the center of the rise, lowered her head, and lay down. The rest of the pride followed her lead. One by one, they lay down in the grass, eyes still fixed on the jeep, but not with hostility, with ease, with something that resembled peace. Emma sat frozen, Jasper leaning against her leg. "They're showing you," Duma whispered, "that they're not afraid of you, and they don't want you to be afraid of them." Emma could hardly breathe. "Is this normal?" "No," Duma said softly. "This is unthinkable." They sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes, watching the pride rest in the grass, as if welcoming them into their world, not chasing them out of it. Eventually, the lioness stood, gave a low call, and the pride rose with her. One final glance, in Emma's direction, then they turned, vanishing into the tall grass without sound or warning. Emma sat back, stunned. She didn't need to say it. Duma already knew. The lions hadn't just saved her life, they had chosen to let her in. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the image of the pride, lying down in full view, not out of exhaustion or threat, but by choice. It was a gesture she would never forget. It wasn't just a sign of tolerance, it was a message. The fire outside her cabin flickered low. Jasper slept soundly at the foot of her bed, finally free of the tension that had clung to him since the attack. Emma rose quietly, pulled a blanket around her shoulders, and stepped outside. The bush was alive with quiet sounds, crickets chirping, frogs croaking, and the soft breeze rustling through the tall grass. She sat on the porch steps, staring into the darkness. She didn't expect to see anything, but part of her still hoped. Then, without warning, her heart jumped. Out in the distance, barely within the fire's reach, stood the lioness. Emma didn't move. Her breath caught in her throat, and she sat perfectly still. The lioness took a few slow steps forward, then stopped. Behind her, the bush remained still. She had come alone this time. Unlike before, this didn't feel like a chance encounter. This felt intentional. Jasper stirred behind Emma and wandered out beside her. He stopped as soon as he spotted the lioness, his body tense for a moment. But then, strangely, he sat, not growling, not afraid, just watching. The lioness sat as well. They remained that way for several long minutes to animals, one wild, one tamed, yet both shaped by the same encounter. Emma didn't speak. She didn't need to. The moment was complete, without words. Eventually, the lioness rose. But before leaving, she took a step closer to the edge of the firelight, her golden fur glowing faintly. Emma could see the faint scar near her front leg, now a mark from an old battle. Perhaps the very one that made her the leader of her pride. The lioness gave a low, breathy huff, like a sigh, and then she turned and disappeared into the grass. Once more. This time Emma didn't feel sadness watching her leave. She felt something deeper, a sense of being chosen, not as prey, not even as a threat, but as something rare, a fellow creature who had proven her place, however briefly, in the lioness's world. The next day, Emma spoke with Duma about what had happened. She came back, Emma said quietly, alone. She didn't come close, just stayed nearby, like she was checking on us. Duma listened, then gave a thoughtful nod. That's the third time she's returned to you, unprovoked. That's no accident. It means she trusts you. Emma let those words sink in. It almost felt like goodbye. Maybe, Duma said. Or maybe it was thanks. Emma didn't respond, but she knew what she felt. Gratitude wasn't just a human emotion. The lioness had seen her fight for Jasper without fear. She had watched a human act with the same fierceness that animals did when protecting their young. That mattered. Over the next few days, the lioness didn't return, but Emma could still feel her presence in the wild, in the quiet rustling of the grass, in the hush that fell over the trees just before night. She extended her stay at the lodge, not to chase the lioness down, but to stay near something she hadn't expected to find in the wilderness, but respect. One evening, as she scrolled through the photos on her camera, she found a shot she didn't remember taking. Just a blur of gold in tall grass, barely in focus, but unmistakably the lioness. She smiled and set the camera down. Jasper climbed into her lap and curled up. Some things, she whispered, stroking his fur, you just don't need a picture for. And she meant it, because what had happened between her and that lioness couldn't be captured in a lens or explained in a headline. Had to be lived to be understood, and it would live in her heart forever. The final week of Emma's stay unfolded like a slow goodbye. The vibrant wilderness that once seemed vast and unpredictable now felt like a place of quiet belonging. Each morning, she walked with Jasper along safer paths near the lodge, and each night she sat beneath the stars, listening to the distant calls of hyenas or the occasional roar echoing from beyond the trees. But the lioness never returned. The absence wasn't disappointing, it was understood. Whatever connection had passed between them had already run its course. It didn't need to be repeated to remain powerful. Emma knew it was almost time to leave. On her last morning in the Delta, the staff gathered to see her off. Duma handed her a hand-carved wooden lioness figure. It was simple, smooth, and beautifully made. He didn't say much as he gave it to her, just a quiet smile and a nod. She remember you, he said. Emma hugged him tightly. I'll remember her too. As the jeep rolled away from the lodge toward the small bush airstrip, Emma looked out at the landscape. The golden plains stretched far beyond the horizon, dotted with acacia trees and patches of tall grass that shimmered in the sun. It all looked peaceful, again just as it had on her first day. But she was leaving a different person. The flight back to Mon was short. As the small plane rose into the sky, Emma kept her face pressed to the window, scanning the ground for one last glimpse of movement. She didn't see any lions, but that was okay. Some things didn't need closure. Some things stayed with you without ever saying goodbye. Back in the US, the world felt louder, faster, more crowded. Emma returned to Florida with Jasper, who quickly fell back into his old routines, chasing lizards in the backyard, barking at squirrels from the window, and curling up beside her every evening. But even he seemed a little different, a little more watchful, a little more content. Emma had changed more deeply. She no longer chased photos for recognition or adventure. Instead, she began speaking to wildlife groups and schools, sharing the story not with drama or exaggeration, but with quiet truth. She told them how she fought a python with her bare hands, how she nearly lost her dog, and how a lioness stepped in when no one else could. People were stunned by the tale. Many didn't believe it. Some said it was coincidence. Others thought it was a miracle. But Emma didn't argue. She simply said, "You don't have to believe it. I was there. That's enough." One day, an editor from a travel and wildlife magazine reached out. They had heard her speak and wanted to publish her story. Emma hesitated at first. This wasn't just another assignment. It was something personal, sacred even. But eventually, she agreed on one condition. The story can't just be about the lions, she told them. It has to be about the silence, the moment, the reason they stepped in, because it wasn't luck. It wasn't just instinct. It was something else. The article was published under the title, "The Lioness That Watched." Within days, it went viral. Wildlife lovers, conservationists, and everyday people shared it across platforms, marveling at the strange and beautiful bond formed deep in the African wild. Messages poured in from strangers. Some asked for more details. Others simply said thank you for reminding them that even in nature's harshest places, kindness could exist. Emma never capitalized on the story. She didn't sign a book deal or accept interviews on television. She believed that some moments weren't meant for profit. They were meant to be honored. In the months that followed, she kept the carved lioness figurine on her desk. Every so often, she would glance at it and smile, not because she missed the lioness, but because she knew she had been part of something few people ever get to experience. It wasn't about surviving the wild. It was about being seen by it and seen as one of its own. A year passed, but Emma's experience in Botswana never faded. The scars on her leg were faint now, but every time she caught sight of them, she was reminded of that extraordinary moment when survival, instinct, and trust collided under the African sun. The article, "The Lioness That Watched," continued to ripple across the globe. People from all walks of life sent Emma letters and emails. Some asked about the lions, others about Jasper, and many simply wanted to know if the story was real. There were skeptics, of course, but far more were moved. One message stood out among them all. It came from a researcher named Dr. Leela Moyo, a wildlife behavioral expert based in Nairobi. She had been studying predator-prey relationships for over a decade, but had never heard of anything quite like what Emma had described. She invited Emma to a wildlife symposium in Kenya to speak not just about the incident, but about how it challenged what science believed about animal behavior. Emma hesitated. She wasn't a scientist, and she didn't see herself as any kind of expert. But after talking to Duma through a video call, who smiled and told her, "Go tell them what the lions already know," she agreed. The event was held in Nairobi National Park, a place where the city skyline met wild savanna. Emma stood on stage before a room full of conservationists, scientists, rangers, and students. Jasper was by her side, calm and confident, wearing a little scarf the lodge staff had given him on her last day in Botswana. She shared the story honestly and simply. The python, the fight, the moment she thought all hope was gone, and the lioness. She told them about the visits at night, the unspoken understanding, and how the pride lay down in the grass, as if to say, "You're safe here." When she finished, there was a long silence, then thunderous applause. Not because it was a flashy story, but because something in it felt deeply human and deeply wild. After the talk, Dr. Moyo approached her. "I believe you," she said. "We've seen glimpses of this before. Elephants mourning their dead, gorillas protecting lost children. Maybe lions, too, are more than we ever imagined." Emma smiled. "They already are." Back in Florida, Emma made a quiet decision. She donated the proceeds from the magazine article to a conservation program supporting lion habitats in Botswana. She wanted to give something back to the land that had given her a second chance. One summer afternoon, a small package arrived at her home. It was from the lodge. Inside was a photo Duma had taken with a trail camera. It showed the lioness standing on the same rise from before, her cubs now nearly grown. She stood tall, proud, watching the grasslands as the wind swept through her mane. On the back of the photo, Duma had written one sentence: "She still comes to the same place." Emma framed the picture and placed it beside the carved lioness on her desk. She didn't need to return to know her story lived on out there in the brush, in the dust, in the pride that had once made a choice no one could explain. As for Jasper, he became something of a local legend. People in the neighborhood often asked to meet the dog the lions saved, but Emma never let the attention change their quiet life. Walks, naps in the sun, the occasional road trip. Jasper had earned every bit of peace, and every now and then, Emma would wake in the night and step outside, just to listen to the silence, to the stars, to the memory of paws in the grass. GHA had gone to Africa seeking quiet. She had found something far greater, not just survival, but a story shared by the earth itself.